Who invited the help to the boardroom? William Whitmore III's words slice through Manhattan's most exclusive executive sanctuary. His pale blue eyes gleam with practiced cruelty as Dom Perignon splashes across Selena Jenkins' black Armani blazer, golden liquid against dark fabric. His manufactured oops draws knowing chuckles from the mahogany table, but Selena's jaw tightens, her knuckles whitening against her briefcase handle. Her dark fingers find the platinum watch and press a nearly invisible button. Click. The sound cuts through privileged laughter like a blade. Board members freeze, coffee cups suspended midair. Did she just... The whisper dies when Selena's shoulders straighten, her chin lifting with dangerous calm. The security guard's hand inches toward his radio. When she strides toward the private elevator, heels clicking against marble, no one moves to stop her. The golden doors whisper shut. Selena stares at her reflection, champagne glistening on her blazer. But she's smiling now, the kind of smile that promises consequences. Her watch reads 2 minutes, 37 seconds. The countdown has begun, and William Whitmore III has no idea that justice is about to collect its debt. The executive elevator climbs 60 floors in silence, but Selena's mind travels much further, back to Harvard Business School's hallowed halls where she graduated valedictorian, back to the cramped apartment where she watched her father's heart give out under the weight of workplace discrimination, back to the moment 3 years ago when Whitmore Corporation teetered on the edge of bankruptcy and Jenkins Capital swooped in like a guardian angel with a 31% acquisition. They never saw it coming. Old money rarely does. "Are you here for the cleaning crew interview?" The receptionist's voice cuts through her memories as the elevator doors part to reveal the marble mausoleum of executive privilege. The young blonde woman doesn't even look up from her computer screen, her manicured nails clicking against the keyboard with the rhythm of assumptions. Behind her, oil paintings of dead white men in expensive suits glare down from gilded frames, their eyes following Selena's movement like a Renaissance security system. "Service elevator is over there, ma'am." The security guard's voice carries that particular brand of politeness that masks contempt. His hand rests casually on his radio, fingers twitching with the eagerness of a man who's finally found someone he can legally intimidate. But when Selena continues walking toward the main conference room without acknowledgement, something in his posture shifts. The radio remains silent. Inside the boardroom, William Whitmore II, the patriarch whose portrait hangs largest among the gallery of corporate ghosts, extends a liver-spotted hand without rising from his leather throne. "Sandra, isn't it? Or was it Sabrina?" His voice carries the casual cruelty of a man who's spent 78 years never having to remember the names of people he considers beneath notice. "We're so grateful for the diversity initiative bringing us such enthusiastic participants." CFO Bradley Morrison chuckles from his position at the mahogany table, his Harvard MBA pin gleaming on his lapel like a tiny shield. Now, William. I'm sure our diversity team briefed her appropriately, though perhaps we should stick to simple explanations today. He slides a single sheet of paper across the polished surface, quarterly projections deliberately simplified, numbers rounded to the nearest million, technical terminology replaced with elementary concepts. "Let someone with experience handle the actual numbers," adds Victoria Sterling, the legal head whose silver hair is pulled into a bun so tight it could cut glass. Her smile could freeze champagne. "We wouldn't want any confusion about our business model, sweetie." But Selena isn't taking notes on their condescension. Her fingers work beneath the table, documenting every microaggression on her phone with the methodical precision of a surgeon preparing for a complex operation. Each dismissive comment, each mispronounced name, each assumption becomes data. Evidence in a case they don't even know they're building against themselves. From across the room, Patricia Reynolds catches her eye. The mid-level operations manager has been watching the exchange with growing discomfort. her dark skin flushed with second-hand embarrassment and something deeper. Recognition, perhaps, or the memory of her own battles fought in smaller conference rooms with smaller stakes. When their eyes meet, Patricia's hand moves almost imperceptibly toward her purse, where a USB drive waits like a loaded gun. Selena's phone buzzes with a message from Marcus Sterling, her legal partner and former federal prosecutor, whose office overlooks Central Park from 40 floors above street level. Legal team on standby, timeline 48H. The words appear and disappear as if they never existed, but their meaning burns bright in Selena's memory. Why don't we begin with some basic market analysis? William III interjects, his voice dripping with the kind of patience reserved for children and intellectual inferiors. I'm sure you'll find it educational. The PowerPoint presentation begins, each slide a masterclass in institutional gaslighting, market share numbers that don't add up, profit margins that defy mathematical logic, patent portfolios that somehow omit Jenkins Capital's most valuable contributions. But Selena doesn't interrupt, doesn't correct, doesn't reveal the depth of her knowledge. Instead, she watches and waits, her Patek Philippe counting down seconds while her adversaries dig their own graves with every condescending word. They think they're teaching her. They have no idea she's studying them. The PowerPoint clicks to slide 17, and William III's voice takes on the patronizing tone of a private school headmaster addressing scholarship students. Now, I know these technical terms might be overwhelming, but try to follow along. His laser pointer circles meaningless pie charts while the real numbers, the ones that matter, remain carefully hidden behind corporate smoke and mirrors. Bradley Morrison leans forward with the enthusiasm of a man explaining arithmetic to a particularly slow child. You see, sweetie, when we talk about intellectual property portfolios, we're referring to patents that generate revenue streams. Think of it like, well, like a recipe book, but for making money. His condescension drips like honey poisoned with arsenic, each word chosen to diminish and belittle. But Selena has seen these numbers before. The real ones, hidden in offshore accounts, disguised as consulting fees, laundered through subsidiary corporations that exist only on paper. The $2.3 billion in patent theft from Jenkins Capital's innovation labs, the 47 unreported safety violations at the Detroit manufacturing plant, the systematic wage suppression affecting over 3,000 employees across 6 states. Her fingers move beneath the table, documenting each fabrication with photographic evidence and audio recordings that will prove devastating in federal court. Maybe we should take a little break, Victoria Sterling suggests with a smile that could cut diamonds. Give our guest time to absorb all this complex information. The word guest carries the weight of a slur, delivered with surgical precision to remind everyone present exactly where they believe Selena belongs in their hierarchy. William II's weathered face creases into what might charitably be called a grin. Excellent idea. Patricia, why don't you give our visitor a nice tour of the facilities, show her the employee break room, the gift shop, somewhere more appropriate to her interests? The laughter that follows is worse than the words. 12 men in $1,000 suits, finding genuine amusement in their own cruelty. But Patricia Reynolds doesn't laugh. Instead, she stands with the careful grace of someone who has learned to navigate minefields disguised as boardrooms. Of course, Mr. Whitmore, I'd be happy to show Miss Jenkins around. The emphasis on Ms. is subtle but pointed, a small act of rebellion that doesn't go unnoticed. That's so sweet of you, Patricia, Victoria Sterling purrs, her voice carrying the particular venom reserved for women who dare to show solidarity across racial lines. I'm sure you two will have so much in common to discuss. As they exit the boardroom, Patricia's hand brushes against Selena's with deliberate intent. The USB drive transfers seamlessly, a small piece of digital dynamite that contains enough evidence to bring down empires. Safety violations, Patricia whispers, her voice barely audible above the marble echo of their footsteps. Detroit plant. 12 workers hospitalized last month, covered up by Morrison's accounting team. The elevator doors close with a whisper of conspiracy, and Patricia's professional mask finally slips. They did the same thing to me 5 years ago. Different room, same script. Her dark eyes burn with accumulated rage and something more dangerous, hope. But you're not like the others who came before, are you? Selena's Patek Philippe gleams in the elevator's golden light as she checks the time. No, Patricia, I'm not. Her voice carries the quiet authority of someone who has spent years preparing for this exact moment. In fact, I think it's time they learned exactly who they're dealing with. Back in the boardroom, William III is already reaching for his private phone, fingers dancing across the screen as he types a message to Senator Goldman, the same senator whose photograph hangs prominently behind the head table, arm draped around William II's shoulders at some exclusive fundraising dinner. We may need to apply some pressure to our diversity problem, he dictates to his assistant. Nothing illegal, of course, just some strategic complications to remind certain people of their place. Morrison nods enthusiastically, already calculating the cost-benefit analysis of destroying a reputation versus potential legal exposure. I have some contacts at the SEC who might be interested in conducting a very thorough audit of Jenkins Capital. Amazing how many violations they can find when they're motivated to look. Victoria Sterling's fingers drum against the mahogany table with the rhythm of a funeral march. And there's always the patent litigation route. We have enough lawyers on retainer to bury her in paperwork for the next decade. But none of them noticed the small red light blinking on Selena's abandoned water glass. A seemingly innocent piece of surveillance technology that has been recording every word, every confession, every casual admission of criminal intent. The Patek Philippe wasn't just a timepiece, it was a command center, and they've just provided enough evidence to ensure their own destruction. 43 floors below, Marcus Sterling receives a notification on his encrypted phone. The message is simple. Phase 2 complete. Commence Omega. The timer now reads 36 hours and counting, and the Whitmore Empire has no idea that its foundation is already crumbling beneath their handmade Italian shoes. Wednesday, 2:30 p.m. The message appears on Marcus Sterling's encrypted phone with the finality of a judge's gavel. Omega is live. Target, Friday, 2 p.m. Cell. 48 hours to dismantle an empire built on generations of privilege and protected by layers of legal immunity that money can buy. But Marcus has been preparing for this moment since the day Selena Jenkins walked into his Central Park office 3 years ago, her father's medical records spread across mahogany like evidence in a murder trial. Confirmed. Legal foundation secured, he types back, his fingers steady despite the magnitude of what they're about to unleash. James Harrington's name appears in his contacts. Former Attorney General, current partner at the most prestigious white-collar defense firm in Manhattan, and the only man in America with enough gravitas to make the Securities and Exchange Commission move at warp speed. The war room assembles with military precision. Patricia Reynolds uploads terabytes of data to secure cloud servers, her hands shaking as she watches 5 years of carefully documented evidence stream across fiber optic cables like digital justice. Safety violation reports that Morrison's accounting team buried under shell company invoices. Email chains where William III jokes about teaching the help their place. Audio recordings of board meetings where human lives are reduced to liability calculations and acceptable losses. Marcus's forensics team works through the night, their screens glowing like electronic campfires in the darkness of corporate warfare. Every deleted email recovered, every hidden bank transfer traced, every offshore account mapped with the precision of surgeons dissecting a malignant tumor. The $47 million tax evasion scheme unfolds like a roadmap to federal prison. Each wire transfer timestamp providing irrefutable evidence of criminal intent. Thursday morning breaks over Manhattan with the promise of reckoning. Legal injunctions flow from James Harrington's office like water breaking through a dam. Asset freezes, document preservation orders, emergency motions that will land on federal judges' desks before their morning coffee grows cold. The SEC investigation request carries Harrington's signature and the weight of a man who once held the nation's highest law enforcement office. 12 workers hospitalized, Patricia whispers into her encrypted phone, her voice breaking as she reads from medical records that Whitmore's corporate physicians were ordered to falsify. Lung damage from chemical exposure. Morrison's team classified it as flu outbreak to avoid OSHA reporting requirements. Each word is a nail in a coffin that the Whitmore family is building for themselves, one lie at a time. But 43 floors above, William III remains blissfully unaware that his empire is crumbling in real time. He leans back in his leather throne, fingers dancing across his phone screen as he crafts messages to Senator Goldman with the casual confidence of a man who believes himself untouchable. The diversity problem is escalating, he types, may need creative solutions to remind certain people of their place in the natural order. The reply comes within minutes. Legislative connections available, committee assignments flexible, happy to discuss over golf this weekend. Morrison enters the boardroom with the swagger of a man calculating the cost-benefit analysis of destroying a human life. SEC contacts confirmed. They're very interested in conducting a comprehensive audit of Jenkins Capital. Amazing how many violations surface when you know where to look. His Harvard MBA pin catches the afternoon light like a tiny sword, polished and ready for battle. Victoria Sterling's manicured fingers drum against the mahogany table with the rhythm of a death march. Patent litigation team is standing by. We can bury her in legal fees for the next decade. Discovery alone will cost her millions. Her smile could freeze champagne at room temperature. But none of them noticed the small red light still blinking on Selena's abandoned water glass, or the way their voices carry through the building's ventilation system to strategically placed recording devices that Marcus's team installed during routine maintenance visits. Every casual admission of criminal conspiracy is being captured in crystal-clear digital audio, time-stamped and encrypted with military-grade security protocols. William III's moment of doubt arrives like an unwelcome dinner guest. Did we go too far with the diversity comment? The question hangs in the air for exactly 3 seconds before Morrison's reassurance cuts through like a scalpel. She's just another entitled minority playing victim. We own this company, this building, half the judges in the Southern District. What's she going to do? Sue us? The laughter that follows will sound particularly hollow when played back in federal court. Thursday night. The media dossiers compile themselves with algorithmic precision. Financial reporters at the Wall Street Journal receive anonymous tips backed by forensic accounting evidence. Investigative journalists at the New York Times find USB drives in their mailboxes containing audio files and corporate documents that read like a manual for institutional racism. Civil rights attorneys across the country wake up to encrypted messages containing enough evidence to fuel lawsuits for the next generation. Marcus Sterling's phone buzzes with updates every hour. Asset tracking complete. Criminal referrals filed. Congressional inquiry initiated. International banking cooperation secured. Each notification brings the Whitmore empire one step closer to complete collapse, their foundation eroded by the very tools they thought would protect them forever. Friday morning, 6 a.m. Patricia Reynolds sits in her small Queens apartment, watching the sun rise through windows that will soon overlook a very different world. In 8 hours, she will walk into that marble mausoleum as the incoming chief executive officer of Whitmore Corporation. In 8 hours, she will deliver justice not just for herself, but for every worker who ever suffered in silence while rich men counted profits in the boardroom above. The emergency board meeting notice goes out with exactly 48 hours advance, legally sufficient, strategically devastating. William III receives the notification while sipping coffee from a cup worth more than most people's monthly rent, completely unaware that he's about to become the starring character in the most expensive lesson about consequences ever taught in American corporate history. Marcus Sterling checks his watch, a simple Timex that keeps perfect time without the need for precious metals or status symbols. Phase 3 initiated, he messages Selena. Target confirmed, Friday 2 p.m., justice incoming. The countdown reaches its final hours, and somewhere in Manhattan, Selena Jenkins prepares to teach the Whitmore family what power really looks like when it's wielded by someone who actually deserves it. Friday, 2 p.m. The boardroom doors swing open with the weight of destiny, and Selena Jenkins enters not as the humiliated victim of Wednesday afternoon, but as something far more dangerous, a woman who has spent 48 hours systematically dismantling the foundation of everything the Whitmore family believed to be unshakable. Behind her, Marcus Sterling moves with the predatory grace of a federal prosecutor who has never lost a case, flanked by 3 attorneys whose combined resumes read like a Supreme Court wish list. But it's the 4th figure that causes the blood to drain from William III's face, like champagne from a shattered crystal flute. James Harrington, former Attorney General of the United States, the man whose signature appears on more criminal indictments than any prosecutor in American history, settles into his chair with the calm authority of someone who has brought down presidents and prime ministers with equal efficiency. Allow me to properly introduce myself. Selena's voice cuts through the marble silence with surgical precision, each word weighted with 3 years of careful preparation. I am Selena Jenkins, Chief Executive Officer of Jenkins Capital, and as of 3 years ago, controlling shareholder of 31% of Whitmore Corporation, acquired during your family's rather unfortunate financial crisis. The silence that follows is the kind that precedes avalanches and nuclear explosions. William III's face cycles through emotions like a malfunctioning traffic light: confusion, recognition, disbelief, and finally, the dawning horror of a man who realizes he's been playing checkers while his opponent has been orchestrating chess on a global scale. That's impossible, Morrison whispers, his Harvard MBA pin suddenly looking like a child's toy in a room full of weapons-grade intellects. We have majority control, the board structure. The board structure, Marcus interrupts with a smile that could freeze liquid nitrogen, is about to undergo some rather dramatic changes. He places a leather portfolio on the mahogany table with the reverence of a priest handling sacred relics. Ladies and gentlemen, I present comprehensive documentation of criminal conspiracy, tax evasion, patent theft, safety violations resulting in bodily harm, and systematic civil rights violations spanning the last 7 years. USB drives appear on the table like digital dominoes, each one containing enough evidence to destroy a career, a reputation, a legacy built on generations of carefully curated privilege. Patricia Reynolds, no longer the frightened middle manager who served coffee to men who never learned her name, slides the drives across polished wood with the confidence of someone who has finally found her voice. Safety violations at the Detroit plant, she announces, her words carrying the weight of 12 hospitalized workers whose suffering was reduced to line items on Morrison's quarterly reports. Patent theft totaling $2.3 billion in intellectual property stolen from Jenkins Capital's innovation labs. Tax evasion through offshore shell companies in the amount of $47 million over 3 fiscal years. William III's moment of realization arrives like a freight train loaded with consequences. This was planned from the beginning. His voice cracks like his grandfather's china hitting marble floors, the entitlement of 70 years dissolving into the terrified whimper of a man who suddenly understands that actions have consequences, even for people like him. You planned this, William, Selena responds with the cold precision of a surgeon removing a malignant tumor. Every racist comment, every casual dismissal, every moment you treated human beings as expendable assets in your personal board game. I simply responded appropriately. Victoria Sterling's manicured facade crumbles like ancient parchment exposed to sunlight. But Senator Goldman, our legal protections, the immunity guarantees. Her words trail off as Marcus produces a tablet displaying federal arrest warrants with her name printed in official government fonts. Senator Goldman, James Harrington speaks for the first time, his voice carrying the gravitas of a man who once held the nation's highest law enforcement office, is currently explaining his relationship with this organization to a federal grand jury. His cooperation has been illuminating. The voting begins with the mechanical precision of a Swiss timepiece. Board members who spent decades protecting the Whitmore dynasty suddenly discover urgent reasons to distance themselves from a sinking ship. 31% becomes 47% as allies abandon their posts. 47% becomes 62% as survival instincts override loyalty. 62% becomes 89% as the final holdouts realize that integrity might be more valuable than inherited wealth. Motion to remove the Whitmore family from all corporate positions, Marcus announces with the solemnity of a funeral director. All in favor. Hands rise around the table like white flags of surrender. William III stares at the unanimous vote with the expression of a man watching his own execution, his pale blue eyes reflecting the fluorescent lights like ice about to shatter. Motion to install Patricia Reynolds as Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately. More hands, more surrender. More justice served at room temperature in a marble mausoleum that reeks of old money and older sins. William III's final words carry the weight of generational entitlement collapsing under its own moral bankruptcy. You have no idea what you've done. The connections we have, the power structures we control. Selina corrects with a smile that could melt steel or freeze stars, depending on which side of history you're standing on. Past tense, William. You had power. Now you have federal charges, asset freezes, and approximately 48 hours before your mugshot appears on the front page of every newspaper in America. The gavel falls, metaphorically, since corporate boardrooms don't actually use gavels, and with it, an empire built on privilege, protected by immunity, and sustained by the belief that some people are simply too important to face consequences. Patricia Reynolds rises from her chair, no longer a victim, no longer invisible, no longer silent. My first act as CEO, she announces, her voice carrying across marble walls that have never heard words like these before, will be to establish a $50 million fund for worker safety improvements and victim compensation. My second will be to implement a mandatory 40% diversity requirement for all leadership positions. The transformation is complete. The system hasn't just been challenged, it's been systematically dismantled and rebuilt from the ground up, with justice as its new foundation stone. Outside the 47th floor windows, Manhattan continues its relentless march toward tomorrow, unaware that history has just been written in a boardroom where champagne once stained Italian wool and racist slurs once echoed off marble walls. The perp walk begins at exactly 4:47 p.m. when federal agents escort William Whitmore III through the marble lobby of his family's tower, the same lobby where he had humiliated Selena Jenkins just 72 hours earlier. The champagne stain on her blazer has long since been cleaned, but the stain on his legacy will follow him to federal prison and beyond. Photographers capture every step of his descent from corporate royalty to defendant, their cameras clicking like digital typewriters composing the obituary of old money privilege. Bradley Morrison's Harvard MBA pin gleams one final time under the harsh fluorescent lights of the federal courthouse as handcuffs replace his platinum cufflinks. The man who once dismissed human suffering as acceptable losses now faces 18 months in minimum security prison and $2.3 million in personal fines, a number that coincidentally matches the exact value of the patents his accounting team helped steal from Jenkins Capital. Victoria Sterling's silver hair, once pulled into a bun so tight it could cut glass, now hangs loose around her shoulders as she signs the plea agreement that will keep her out of federal prison in exchange for testimony against Senator Goldman. Her law license, earned at Yale, polished at corporate boardrooms across Manhattan, disappears into bureaucratic filing cabinets along with her six-figure salary and corner office view of Central Park. But it's the transformation of Patricia Reynolds that truly rewrites the narrative of justice in America. 6 months after being dismissed as just another diversity hire, she stands behind the mahogany podium of the renamed Jenkins-Reynolds Tower, announcing the company's commitment to worker safety with the authority of someone who has crawled through the wreckage of systematic oppression and emerged stronger on the other side. Effective immediately, Patricia's voice carries across the marble lobby where oil paintings of dead white men have been replaced by portraits of civil rights leaders, labor organizers, and ordinary workers whose contributions built this company from the ground up. Whitmore Corporation, now operating as Reynolds Industrial Solutions, will invest $50 million in comprehensive safety upgrades across all manufacturing facilities. The check presentation ceremony takes place in the same boardroom where champagne once dripped from Italian wool. Families of injured workers, men and women who spent years fighting insurance companies and corporate lawyers for medical coverage, receive compensation that finally acknowledges their humanity instead of calculating their suffering in quarterly profit margins. Mary Washington, whose husband lost 3 fingers to faulty machinery that Morrison's team knew was defective, holds a check for $340,000 with hands that shake not from fear, but from the overwhelming relief of finally being heard. The congressional hearing unfolds with the theatrical precision of a morality play written by the gods of justice. Senator Goldman, stripped of his committee assignments and facing his own federal investigation, squirms in his witness chair as James Harrington reads aloud the text messages that reveal a network of corruption spanning 3 decades and touching every level of government from City Hall to the Senate floor. The American people deserve to know. Harrington's voice thunders through C-SPAN cameras that carry his words into living rooms across the nation. How systematic racism and corporate greed conspired to deny justice to working families while protecting the privileged few who profited from their suffering. The ripple effects spread like digital wildfire across social media platforms and corporate boardrooms throughout Manhattan's financial district. 12 major corporations announce immediate diversity initiatives within 72 hours of Patricia's appointment as CEO. The Harvard Business School adds the Jenkins-Reynolds case to its curriculum as a mandatory study in corporate accountability and ethical leadership. But perhaps the most powerful transformation occurs in a small cemetery in Queens, where Selena Jenkins kneels beside her father's granite headstone on a crisp October morning, 6 months after the Whitmore empire collapsed. The marble is still warm from morning sunlight when she places fresh flowers beside the military honor guard flag that recognizes his service in Vietnam, service that meant nothing to the corporate executives who destroyed his health with discriminatory workplace practices. "The system changed, Dad," she whispers to the granite that bears his name and dates, her voice carrying across grass still wet with dew. "Not just for me, but for everyone who comes after. Patricia's running the company now, and she's making sure no worker ever suffers what you did." The wind carries her words across the cemetery like prayers, ascending to whatever heaven receives the souls of men who died fighting injustice with nothing but their dignity as armor. The Jenkins Foundation Scholarship Program announces its first recipients on the anniversary of that infamous champagne spill. 50 young people of color who will attend Harvard Business School with full tuition and living expenses covered by the very money that once funded the Whitmore family's discriminatory practices. Each scholarship bears a small plaque, in memory of all those who suffered in silence and in hope of all those who will speak truth to power. William III's final humiliation comes not in federal court, but in the employment office of a mid-tier consulting firm where he applies for an entry-level position at 57 years old. The young black woman conducting his interview, a recent MBA graduate whose grandfather cleaned toilets in the same building where William once held board meetings, asks him to explain the gap in his employment history with the professional courtesy reserved for former convicts and disgraced executives. "I was involved in some legal complications," he mumbles, his voice carrying none of the imperial authority that once silenced boardrooms and crushed careers. The irony is lost on him, but not on the universe that occasionally remembers to balance its scales. The mansion auction draws crowds of reporters and justice seekers who watch as Selena Jenkins outbids real estate developers and hedge fund managers for the Whitmore family estate in the Hamptons. But instead of occupying the marble palace where generations of privilege once plotted to maintain their stranglehold on power, she transforms it into the Jenkins Community Center, a place where young entrepreneurs of color receive free business training, legal assistance, and access to the kind of networks that were once reserved for white men with the right surnames and prep school connections. The final scene writes itself with poetic justice that would make Shakespeare weep with envy. Patricia Reynolds, now 6 months into her tenure as CEO of Reynolds Industrial Solutions, stands in the executive elevator that once carried her fear and now lifts her authority to heights she never imagined possible. The same elevator where she once trembled at the prospect of serving coffee to men who never learned her name now carries her to board meetings where her voice shapes policy, protects workers, and proves that power wielded with conscience can heal wounds that seemed permanent. The red light on Selena's abandoned water glass, the surveillance device that captured every criminal confession, now sits in an evidence locker at the FBI field office in Manhattan, its digital memory preserving the voices of men who believed themselves above consequence. But justice, like water, finds its way through the smallest cracks in even the most carefully constructed fortresses of privilege. And somewhere in Manhattan, in boardrooms where photographs of Patricia Reynolds now hang beside portraits of other leaders who transformed corporate America through courage rather than cruelty, young executives of every color and background learn the most important lesson of all. Power isn't about who you can crush, it's about who you choose to lift.